Two great wrestlers, and there is a ton of respect.
Fighting a trained killer in a cage is not for the weak, considering the millions of scenarios that can occur in the octagon. Those who dedicate their lives to MMA are physically gifted athletes willing to put their health on the line whenever they have a scheduled bout. Although every MMA competitor trains hard to acquire cardio and strength to edge the opponent in a fight. There are some freaks of nature whose physical abilities are off the charts, and they have the genetics to look like the Incredible Hulk on steroids. While their fellow competitors fear some of those fighters due to their intimidating looks, others have acquired that reputation by brutalizing their opponents in the octagon.
And you see, Starks respond, he gets nailed, perfect shot on the button, he goes down, his arm just won't hold him up.
And viciously knocking them out. In this video, we will look at the biggest freaks of nature in UFC or MMA history and analyze how they became the brutes that everyone feared.
Just past the midway point of round 2. Heavyweight title on the line. Couture is down. Lesnar is trying to finish.
From 2007 until 2011, Hector Lombard was on a 25-fight unbeaten streak, with most of those victories coming by a brutal knockout. At a time when USADA wasn't around, the Cuban fighter was jacked up on steroids, which acquired him one-punch knockout power.
You see already when they're close to each other, Jay Silva. Oh, good left hand! The end is there! And that is it!
And made him a force not to be reckoned with. Not only did he look scary and have brute power in his hands, but he was also a alleged judoka and BJJ black belt. Although he fought as a southpaw, his power was so unreal that he could also knock anyone out with his weaker hand.
Now he's a lot more active in this round.
Just ask Falanico Vitelli. When he fought Rousimar Palhares, he managed to hurt and knock the Brazilian through his guard, despite his hands being up. Unfortunately for Lombard, in 2015, by partnering with UFC, USADA implemented the first independent anti-doping program in U.S. professional sport, and the Cuban fighter was not even a shadow of himself after that. Nevertheless, pre-USADA era, he was one of the most feared freaks of nature the MMA world had ever seen.
Hector Lombard, when he puts a flurry on you, when he explodes and attacks, is one of the scariest guys in the division. He has true, legitimate one-punch knockout power.
A former Pride FC middleweight champion with the most wins, knockouts, title defenses, and longest winning streak in Pride history, or as Joe Rogan would call him, a really bad bastard. Wanderlei Silva truly earned his nickname, the Axe Murderer.
In the next 10 fights, went 5-5. Rampage went on a 9-fight win streak, including capturing the light heavyweight title.
Leaving aside his elite fighting skills, BJJ black belt, and the ability to knock people out unconscious, he was also one of the scariest looking dudes in the Pride FC roster. Before each of his fights, during the announcement, he looked straight at his opponent, rubbing and rolling his hands like he had some bad intention in mind. During that process, he would impatiently move left and right, like a caged animal who couldn't wait to be released to eat. Considering his character, behavior, and intimidating look, combined with his brutal fighting style of constant punching and using his knees and soccer kicks to the head, fighters of the Pride FC era had more than one reason to be afraid of the Axe Murderer. He beat MMA legends like Kazushi Sakuraba by knocking the Japanese fighter out cold.
Is going to land. One big one is going to land. But these
knockout!
And there it is! And there it is!
No!
And there it is!
There it is.
One big right hand, Rampage.
And demolished Rampage Jackson twice.
Nice leg kick.
Caught the leg that time. Wanderlei came in quickly.
Wanderlei's finding a home for that leg kick, Mike.
Being such a dominant beast during his prime, no wonder why Chael Sonnen could not let Wanderlei get close. Going toe-to-toe with a Dutch kickboxer on the feet is as bold and foolish as trying to wrestle a bear.
Melvin Manhoef is probably, he's in my top 10 favorite kickboxers of all time.
Although Manhoef was only 5 feet 8 tall and fought in the heavier weight classes, one should not get fooled by his height because he was a freak of nature who was knocking his opponents out cold. His muscle build made him look intimidating, but his scary knockouts even exceeded his frightening look. A few examples of unlucky competitors who felt the power of Manhoef are Ryo Kawamura.
Probably causing Melvin Manhoef to be more cautious than he'd like to be because he really doesn't know what to expect. He did it! Oh, he did it again!
Big right hand.
Well, he did what he did just a minute earlier.
Doug Marshall. And Hisaki Kato, who were all viciously knocked out by the Dutchman. However, his grappling skills were not even close to his striking credentials, which is where most of his opponents could have the advantage over him. His ability to turn someone's lights off with one strike, regardless of the opponent's weight class, is why Melvin Manhoef is considered a freak of nature that nobody wanted to face in a stand-up exchange. If one could imagine what a Viking leader looked like,
Brock Lesnar.
Brock Lesnar might be the first picture coming to our mind. Brock was a force that terrorized the heavyweight division in the late 2000s, standing 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighing 290 pounds.
I swear that if Brock Lesnar got into mixed martial arts right out of college, well, went college wrestler, right into training, really learned striking, and learned slowly.
With a sword tattoo on his chest, a predatory stare, and being jacked up from head to toe. He wasn't much of a striker, but his wrestling credentials, strength, and power were enough to bring fear into each of his opponent's eyes.
Man, I think he could have been one of the all-time greats. I really do.
He's
so
a freak. Strong. Nobody,
he's a freak.
Nobody I remember cutting that much to heavyweight.
Getting in the octagon against him almost felt like falling into a cage of a silverback gorilla.
Very calm and collected here. And Brock immediately goes for the takedown. Frank dives down. He's got a hold of a leg.
And he slips to half guard.
Its style was built on intimidation, charging forward. Taking his opponents down and smashing them with ground and pound strikes. He won the UFC belt by overpowering Randy Couture.
Brock Lesnar has done it!
And demolished Frank Mir in their second meeting to retain the title.
Up against the fence. In big trouble. That's it.
Trying to finish it.
That's it.
Poking is there, and it is all over.
He's out.
Yeah, he is a white boy, and he is jacked. I guess we should just deal with it. Being 6 feet 5 inches tall and 330 pounds of pure muscle.
I'm looking for you, Mike.
Bob Sapp was the first one that was brought up.
I know Bob is big and strong. I said, hold, 1 minute.
Bob Sapp was one of the most intimidating fighters in Pride FC. Bob Sapp looked like a genetically modified beast eager to enter the cage and destroy everything. He wasn't a technical fighter who tried to implement a game plan to outsmart the opponent, but charged forward using brutal force to overpower anyone with his size and muscle. When he fought in K1 in 2002, the Beast beat the kickboxing legend Ernesto Hoost twice. Widely considered one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. During the same year in MMA, he fought the MMA legend Minotauro Nogueira. Even though Bob Sapp lost that bout, he was beating Nogueira most of the fight. Starting with a massive slam in the opening seconds, proving that his strength, size, and power should be taken seriously. Due to his career's downfall, some of us will remember the Beast as a punching bag who was losing the fights without giving any resistance.
With an armbar! Wow! This is outrageous!
However, during the early stage of his career, he was a force not to be reckoned with. In the world of MMA, they don't simply call you the monster for nothing.
Tomorrow is dedicated to Kevin Randleman.
You can't just ask for such a nickname. You have to earn it by doing things that no other fighters can do.
Anytime Mirko Cro Cop is in the ring, Kevin Randleman excellent. Attacks him right away, Heath.
Such was the example at the Pride Total Elimination 2004 event.
I think it's time for new blood, and I'm here.
Kevin
When Randleman was scheduled to face the most feared kickboxer at the time, Mirko Cro Cop, the Croatian was notorious for his high kick knockouts.
By Randleman with a shot back up to his feet. Excellent. And by Randleman, knocks down Cro Cop.
And keeping the fight on your feet against him was almost considered suicide. He was agile, powerful, and widely considered one of the best strikers in MMA. However, Mirko was unaware that he was facing a monster that night. After defending from a clinch position and a takedown attempt, he approached the American relaxed without feeling any danger on the feet. But then, the monster landed a powerful left hook that knocked the Croatian down.
Randleman was going to get knocked out. Here's your answer. What a left hook.
Left hook, yeah. Left hook, and now he's banging away. And the hammer fist is going to do it. You watch, he's going to create some distance so he can strike.
As a man possessed, Randleman followed Mirko down and finished him with heavy ground and pound strikes, shocking the world by knocking out the most feared stand-up artist in Pride FC's history. Kevin Randleman was the first fighter to give Fedor Emelianenko, one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, a run for his money. Despite losing that bout at the end, the American managed to lift Fedor like a feather and suplex him onto his head, causing the audience to jump from their seats in disbelief. To this day, people wonder how the Russian survived that slam. However, Kevin Randleman will be remembered as a freak of nature who knocked Mirko Cro Cop and power suplexed the MMA GOAT. Speaking of Fedor, during the 2000s, he was a dominant force in MMA, dominating and brutalizing everyone he fought, after defeating the best heavyweights of his time and staying undefeated for a decade. Many considered him the greatest martial artist of all time.
Champions. He was the interim champ. Lesnar was the champ.
He beat Frank Mir.
Yeah. He crushed Frank Mir with a ruthless series of uppercuts.
When Fabricio Werdum pulled a massive upset by defeating the last emperor, many thought that fight was a fluke.
Goes down, he's in trouble. He's in trouble big time. Big foot, ground and pound.
Fedor was determined to prove that by delivering the dominant performance against his next opponent, Antonio Bigfoot Silva.
Pride Heavyweight Grand Prix. We talked a little bit about that at the fighter meetings, and immediately there is that overhand right that he's known for.
However, the Brazilian had a different plan that night and absolutely demolished Fedor in the second round, forcing the doctor to stop the fight and prevent the Russian from absorbing more damage. At a time when USADA wasn't around, Bigfoot Silva was another example of a freak of nature that spread fear in his opponent's eyes. He was 6 feet, 4 inches tall, weighed 265 pounds of pure muscle, and had the destructive power to knock out anyone. The Brazilian broke Travis Brown's undefeated record by viciously knocking him out in the first round. And he brutalized the former K1 champion, Alistair Overeem, who was a monster that everyone feared at that time. Although Silva never won the UFC belt despite fighting for the title once, people will always remember him as the monster who brutally beat Fedor Emelianenko. Pudzianowski is arguably the most outstanding strength athlete of all time, considering he holds an incredible 70% winning rate in his strongman career. Competing in this sport, he acquired power and brutal strength unmatched in MMA. Marius looks like a final boss of a video game character that you must fight at the end and waste all the heavy artillery to beat him. During his career as a strongman, Pudzianowski broke the record and won 5 World's Strongest Man titles, and he also won Europe's Strongest Man record 6 times. When the Polish fighter made his MMA transition in 2009, he was already a freak of nature with destructive nuclear power in his hands. He ran through his first MMA opponent, Marcin Najman, like a tank over a car, and needed only 27 seconds to knock out the high-level BJJ black belt, Rolls Gracie Jr. Of course, such brute force comes at a cost, and Pudzianowski's cardio and fighting IQ were not matching his strength. Nevertheless, he proved that the strongman competitors could fight and destroy MMA fighters if they are not playing their cards right. The Reem at his prime looked like the Incredible Hulk on steroids, with his neck muscles starting from the top of his head. Despite being a heavyweight, he was shredded from top to bottom, like a video game character that you customize yourself, building his body to perfection. And Ariane Celeste's reaction sums it all up. He wasn't only a freak of nature that looked intimidating, but he was knocking people out cold, brutalizing them on the feet by using his superior kickboxing credentials. He was a former K1 champion who found success in MMA, and the best way to deal with him in his prime was to take him down or close the distance sooner than your wife would spend your money at the mall. The way he demolished Brock Lesnar was insane, and the destruction of Sergey Pavlovich.
Brock is hurt. A kick to the body. So much punishment to the body. This is going to be it. That's it. It's over.
Who is now one of the top heavyweight prospects in the UFC, just showed how scary Overeem really was. Although he failed to win the UFC belt in his title fight against Stipe Miocic, still, he gave the Ohio native a run for his money moment when he dropped him down with a jab. Overeem on juice was a force not to be reckoned with, and most of his opponents learned that the hard way. The Cuban fighter is undoubtedly the biggest freak of nature the MMA world has ever seen. His athleticism, physicality, power, and explosivity earned Romero a reputation as one of the most feared UFC competitors that ever stepped in the octagon. I've been studying human beings. I've been working on people. I've been operating on people for 50 years. I've never seen a human like him. The tendons in his eyes are 3 times thicker than a normal person. A doctor told Dana White after the UFC sent him for treatment. If you look at Romero's physique, there is no way you would have thought he is in his late 40s. Not only he looks like a monster, but he fights as one. He would stay composed and reserved, and out of nowhere, explode with a flying knee.
Artist today. Oh, knee. That Rock is looking to finish it.
Or a strike meant to knock the opponent out. He was so scary as a competitor that fighters openly admitted they were afraid to face him. I don't want to ever fight that guy. He is a beast. Darren Till.
A lot of people sort of talking about Yoel Romero.
Well, I don't want to ever fight him. He's a beast.
He knocked Chris Weidman and Clifford Starks with vicious flying knees and destroyed former champions like Luke Rockhold and Lyoto Machida. Yoel Romero never won the UFC belt, but nevertheless, he will always be remembered as the biggest freak of nature the world has ever seen. And because this short segment of the video does not do him justice, you can watch a full mini documentary about him here.